Hello, I am Joel McLeod, and welcome to the 905er. As of recording this episode, it is a fact Ontario has reached a higher per capita infection rate of measles than Texas. About 1 month ago, I interviewed Alvin, Tedjo, and Jill Promoli to discuss the rising number of measles cases in Peel region. This highly preventable disease was making a comeback, and I wanted to hear from them about what regional public health could be doing to help stop this outbreak in its tracks. Well, since then, the number of cases have continued to rise unabated. As of recording this episode, 1,400 cases have been reported in Ontario. And where is our public health on this growing crisis? Well, Premier Doug Ford and Minister of Health Silvia Jones refused to do much more than give platitudes, saying there's very little that they can do to get people to take the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine to prevent the spread. It should be noted as well that in Halton alone, vaccine rates for children right now are as low as 24%. That number isn't very unique for the rest of the province. The consequences of measles can be dire for children, leading to complications throughout life, including blindness, a weakened immune system, and even mental development issues, even death in extreme cases. The thing is, we have been here before. Measles is not new, and the vaccine is not new either. One would think that with a proven track record of success on this front, the Ontario government would be able to step up and tackle this growing health crisis. So why aren't they? To talk about this growing health crisis, I have invited to the podcast Andre Picard, health columnist for the Globe and Mail. Andre is a trusted columnist who keeps his ear to the ground with the latest ongoings of Ontario and Canada's healthcare system. During the COVID-19 pandemic, his column was a trusted source for factual information on the latest developments and reports from health officials. He joins me today to discuss why this time around our public health officials are timid to step up to the microphone and what we need from our leaders to protect us all from this easily preventable disease. Okay, well, thank you to Andre Picard from the Globe and Mail, health columnist with the Globe, for coming on today to talk, unfortunately, again, about measles, rising number of cases in the country and in Ontario. Andre, thank you very much for taking the time to come on today.
Yes, a pleasure.
Okay, so before we came on, I did a quick search in terms of what the rising case numbers are. And here in Ontario, last recorded number, I think about 5 days ago, I saw was about 1,400 measles cases. A sizable increase since the last time I talked about this on the podcast. As somebody who kind of keeps an eye on this, can you tell me just how did it get this bad of measles, which is a very preventable disease? How do we let this get this bad in Canada of all countries?
Yeah, it's a good question. We do know measles is essentially the easiest spread disease on Earth. It spreads very, very easily. So you just need a couple of cases, and you just need that spark, and a fire starts pretty quickly. So we're in this situation now where it's the worst we've seen in 30 years in Ontario. We have about 200 cases a week, new cases, up to 1,440. And it's not going to slow down anytime soon from what we can tell. There doesn't seem to be a really determined effort to stop it in any way. So it's going to get worse, and the fear is that we know it's fairly in a particularly community, in the Mennonite community largely, but it's starting to trickle out into the more general population, and that becomes even more difficult to rein it in.
All this is happening. It's kind of the elephant in the room, and let's just talk about it while we're right off the bat. This is only happening a few years out of the COVID pandemic. And one would think we'd have learned all these lessons on how to tackle a problem like this, communicability, vaccination policies, programs, etc. Why aren't the lessons that we learned from this global pandemic being put into place here to just nip this thing in the butt right now and stop it from spreading?
Well, we did learn lessons from COVID, but actually COVID also changed the the reality. It changed the political and social environment. It's not a coincidence that this is spreading in a community that was really angry about COVID. So they were very angry about their churches being shut down. They've become more distanced from public health. This is not an anti-vaccine community. The Mennonites are not anti-vaccine by any stretch of the imagination, but they're angry. And lots of people are angry because of COVID, and we haven't dealt with that. We have to deal with that. A lot of people suffered. A lot of people don't understand why they suffered. You know, why did you close my church? That it's fundamental to people's lives. And it's going to take a long time to rebuild that trust. You know, the expression is you can lose trust in a second, and it takes many, many years to rebuild it. That's the situation we're in. And that in many ways is what's disturbing, because we're seeing this across the country and around the world, actually, where people are pushing away. They know that vaccines work. These are not anti-vaccine people. They know vaccines work, but they don't like public health, and they don't like the government, what they did to them. And this is kind of their response. So it's very complicated, actually.
Okay, on that note, perfect segue into my next question. You know, in the previous episode that I did on the rising number of cases in Peel region, I spoke with Counselor Alvin Tedjo on why medical officers of health around the province are so reluctant to take the lead on this in terms of communicating the efficacy of vaccines, vaccine scheduling strategies, etc. And one of he cited how hard it was at the time. Dr. Peter Lowe, who was the medical officer of health for Peel region, when his term was up, he said, kind of wiped his hands, said, "I'm out of it." He was the medical officer during COVID. He said, "I'm out, guys. I'm done with this. My term is up. Thank you very much." And he was saying on the episode how hard it was for them to find a replacement for him. Uh, and I asked why that was the case, and he said that it was because so many medical officers of health were afraid to communicate the science because they felt that they were abandoned during the pandemic. They were left to fight for themselves. You know, is there truth to this in what you found? Is this like, do we kind of leave our medical professionals to fend for themselves against mistruth and conspiracy theorists and whatnot, and just kind of abandon them when kind of they needed us at the most?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, this is one of the jobs that you don't want these days, is working in public health. You get a lot of hate. You're underfunded. You're underappreciated. People live with death threats every day. They're attacked. Their families are attacked. This is difficult work, and we're not giving them the support they need. But it's also, you know, it's invaluable work. So we have to figure out a way of getting public health back into our daily lives. We have to get over our COVID anger in some way. And again, it's not going to be easy. But, you know, you have people like Dr. Kiernan Moore was saying, I noticed this the other day, he said he was criticized by people like me to saying, you know, you're not doing enough, you're not speaking out. And his response was very interesting. He said, we're sensitive to the fear we've created. And I thought, well, that's interesting, but that's not a reason to recoil. I think you should be doing the
Mhm.
opposite. You have to reach out. If people are fearful of you, you have to go out and say, listen, public health isn't the bad guy. We're keeping your food safe. We're keeping your kids safe. We're keeping you safe. And vaccination is a tiny part of it, but it's an important part. So I think we have to support them more.
It- and like, to me, that's the primary goal, or primary role, I should say, of a public health official, is not so much the frontline medical work. It's really is a communication role of identifying things like this. We're seeing rising numbers cases of preventable diseases. You know, wash your hands, stay put. Don't have measles parties is another one that seems to get
Mm.
pushed back a lot on. And you know, what I guess my question is, what's the role of public health in if the people in charge of it aren't doing the primary role of communicating, the educating us, you and I? Like, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, I don't know. I trust them to read it and communicate to me, hey, we need to take this preventative action. Where does that leave public health then as an institution for us to rely on?
Well, exactly. It leaves them emasculated. You know, the principal tool they have is communication. They have laws, they have the stick, but mostly they have the carrot. They
Hmm.
have to talk to people. They have to convince them. They have to show them that, yes, we make unpopular decisions, but we do it for the betterment of the community. We do it to protect your children. Those messages aren't getting out.
The this is all happening. Of course, everybody's thinking of what's happening south of the border with so Trump's Secretary of Health, Robert Kennedy, going on about how vaccines don't work, and for the record, they do. Uh, but things like vitamin A as a solution to measles outbreaks, and this mistruth and falsehoods and just malarkey, in my opinion. Are you seeing any of that filtering up here? Like, are people listening to taking his advice as gospel over trusted scientists and doctors?
Well, I don't think we have the anti-vax leaders they have in the States. We don't have that in Canada. I think the problem is more fundamental. It's just mistrust.
Hmm.
Uh, in Canada, the problem is much, much worse. Like on a per capita basis, Ontario has 21 times more cases than all of the US. Like
Right.
this is we're not paying enough attention to just how bad this is, right? So, Kennedy, with all the nonsense he's speaking is making a difference, and not in a good way. But it's, I think, having a marginal impact in Canada. In Canada, it's a slightly different issue.
Let's dive into that statistic for a minute, because why do we? I mean, I've always assumed that we were smarter than the Americans. Yet you're right, we're seeing higher per capita infection rate than a state like Texas, which was notorious. Like they are actively anti-vaccine. It seems to me from this far north. Why are we seeing higher case numbers here in Ontario?
Well, I think it's because of a poor reaction. It's really interesting to compare Texas to Ontario because the outbreaks are very similar. They're both in the Mennonite communities, very close communities, but the reaction in the US has been much more aggressive. They have a lot of vaccine clinics. They're talking to the general public. Like they kept it from getting into the general public. That's the difference. And in Canada, we have cases, as you said, in Peel. They're trickling up. We have a hospital in Northern Ontario that's screening people for measles because they're afraid, which actually I think is a good thing. We should be doing a lot more prevention. What we're doing in Ontario is kind of sitting back. Again, Dr. Kiernan Moore said, we expect a couple of hundred cases a week, at least till July. He's just kind of like shrugging. Oh yeah, this is going to keep getting worse for a while, and hopefully hopefully it'll, essentially what they're saying is hopefully it'll contain itself in this community. But why would it?
Well, that seemed that if I'm recalling correctly, I mean that was kind of the strategy for a while during COVID was, the here in Ontario we had the regionals opening. Peel region stayed closed, but Halton was open for business. And people said, okay, but the disease doesn't stop at Winston Churchill. It doesn't say, oh no, I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to cross the street into that jurisdiction. And we seem to be doing this kind of piecemeal region jurisdiction. They'll take care of it instead of a coordinated provincial response to this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the same problem we're doing. We're doing things. We're not doing enough broad prevention, and we're doing it very locally, and it's not going to work. And especially with measles, measles is so much more contagious. Now, the flip side of that, or like make sure nobody's coming in with measles. That's a good way to do it. A lot of what we're doing now is, the horse is out of the barn, and we're closing the barn door, and that's not working.
Here in Ontario, the kind of the government line that we're getting is from Premier Ford, Health Minister Silvia Jones, and as you said, Dr. Kiernan Moore, Chief Medical Officer, is that is isolated to select populations not being vaccinated, particularly the Mennonites. They don't mention the Mennonites in their response, and I guess that's a political thing, but there's something about that does raise a flag. But basically, he's kind of wiping his hands. There's nothing he can do about it. Well, what can you do? And I guess, how much of this is personal responsibility versus just government inaction uh, for this case? Because people are thinking like the government can probably do more.
Yeah, you can certainly do more. I think there's some personal responsibility there, of course, but the government is not enforcing its own law. There is a law in the books. Kids have to be vaccinated to go to school. and then Premier Ford. And I think this is what really makes it difficult to be in public health is you need that political backing, right? That's what
Mhm.
worked during COVID. The public health spoke, the politicians backed it up. Whether you liked it or not is another issue, but they worked together. And that's how it has to work. And they're saying, I heard Premier Ford say, well, somebody who doesn't want a vaccine, what can you do? Well, you can say they don't go to school and make other kids sick. That's what you can do. That's what the law says. You can pressure their parents to get vaccination. You can educate them. You can do communications campaigns in Low German as well as elsewhere in English.
Mhm.
But there's a number of things you can do. You can't just throw up your hands and say, oh, well, they're getting measles. That can't do anything.
Well, okay, this is my personal history. That notion of the government isn't doing anything. It's a bit my personal take is that it's a bit of a gray area, and here's my reason why is we got a letter from my school board saying my kids would be banned because their vaccines weren't up to date, and I said my wife I said no, we are we're very much adamant on getting these vaccines done. We're not vaccine deniers. And it turns out like the left hand wasn't telling the right hand what to do. We're hearing that there are cases of regional public health not being told by doctors, yeah, we've administered a vaccine to this child or to this patient or whatnot. And I'm wondering just why is it not a movement by the provinces to say let's just clear this up? This doesn't even matter if like I need to pressure you to do it. This is just, oh, we just need to tell people, oh yeah, so and so got their vaccines, so and so's got the is up to date, they're good to go.
Yeah, this is some pretty basic stuff. We have terrible medical records in Canada, electronic medical records, and we don't have a vaccine registry. To me, that's something that's really, I've been writing about this for 25 years, the need for a vaccine registry, just so we know who's vaccinated. So you point out, or you make a really good point. While there's this really bad outbreak going on in southwestern Ontario, and nothing's happening. In Toronto, we're kicking kids out of school because we're saying they're not vaccinated, and they are. And it's just because we've done a terrible job of tracking. Those are the worst of both worlds. You don't want to be punishing people who are actually doing the right thing.
Right.
And to do it at this time of year during exams, like this is just bad work on the part of governments.
And, but I mean, I remember back in the day, the Ontario Liberals were trying. There was a program to solve this with Ontario eHealth. The idea was that all of our health documents would be digitized, and if you moved from Hamilton to Thunder Bay, you'd be able to go and your doctor just click on a button and you have all your files for your medical history. And of course, that became a fiasco, and so it just stopped. In today's world, I mean, what excuse do we have for not having a digital copy of probably our most important file on our our health?
Yeah. Yeah, we don't have any excuse. And in fact, most people have a digital record now, but the problem is interoperability. The systems don't talk to each other. So that's where we get into problems with vaccines and such. But vaccines are so important that we should have a separate registry, and that should be tied to people's records. But just registering every single vaccine a kid gets and an adult gets is really important. A lot of us have the old tattered yellow booklet, right?
Yes.
But that just doesn't cut it anymore. That should be in electronic form. And there's apps out there that people can do it themselves, but again, that's not good enough because it's not accessible to public health, it's not accessible to doctors, etc.
Why why are we not seeing more of an outcry from political leaders in your mind? I understand the government is hesitant to really take the wheel on this because I think they're afraid of COVID. They saw the convoy and they're petrified of another convoy coming down to Queen's Park or to Ottawa or whatever have you. But outside of that, municipal leaders, school boards, opposition leaders, I'm not hearing any alarm bells from them on we need a program to solve this. Enough's enough. Let's get on this. Is everybody just so COVID phobic that we won't touch this one? We'll wait until hopefully this burns itself out and we can move on to the next scandal, crisis, whatever have you.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. It's kind of kryptonite. Nobody wants to touch this because there's no good that's going to come from it. You know, the vast majority of people be fine. Yeah, I'm happy I'm vaccinated. But those who don't like it are going to be really loud. And they're going to make your life miserable. And other people aren't going to defend you. So you're right. People are just kind of, hands off. But I think being hands off is one thing, but like what Premier Ford said the other day, I thought was really terrible. He was like, "Oh, we can't pin a kid down and jab him with a needle." Like, just the
Right.
language was terrible. The message was terrible. It has to be positive. It said he should have been saying, "Listen, we want every child to be safe in this province, and we plead to parents to get your kid protected. For your sake."
Right.
I think we should use the language. Always use the language of we have a social contract, right, in society where we do things. Maybe they're an inconvenience to us a little bit, but they're for good for society. And I think the social contract applies especially to children. Nobody should want
Hmm.
harm to come to children. And if you can do a little thing by getting a vaccine, why not? I think we should really be pushing that. You're part of a society, do your part.
Well, on that note, should there be more involvement from the Ministry of Education on this? Because that kind of was the point. The idea was you couldn't attend a publicly funded school without a full vaccination record, um, because it was, again, we learned this during COVID. Schools were kind of like incubators for just disease spread. Polio was a big thing in the 50s, and we thankfully defeated that. Smallpox, etc. Uh, but for this time around, school boards, I mean, you mentioned Toronto's one. My school board is another that seems to step up, but I have heard of others that just kind of say, if you can get your vaccines, that'd be great, and kind of a shrug the shoulder and move on. There should be a directive from the Ministry of Education coming down saying, no, like we'll cut off funding, or this is a directive from the minister. These kids will be suspended until a full schedule is provided. Should we get more involvement than just the health ministry?
I think the education department and schools have a role to play, but I think they're just overwhelmed. They don't have the resources to do it. So there's this law in place. Everybody has to be vaccinated. Who enforces that at every school, right? That's a real pain. Every kid has to come in. Now, if we had a vaccine registry, it would take an hour. You'd just punch in your codes and you'd know here's the
Hmm.
6 kids in our school who are not vaccinated, not the 60 that we don't know, which is what it is now,
Right.
right? So all these people are vaccinated. Uh, that's problematic. And then it's about infrastructure. So when we used to vaccinate kids in school, that's what we should be doing now, right? That ensures that kids get vaccinated. Why do we don't do it? Well, we used to have school nurses too, and the nurses would run the clinic. So all these things are connected. So to me, I'm a big proponent of we should absolutely have nurses in every school. Now we have police in a lot of schools. I think nurses would be a
Right.
lot more useful, to be honest, for all kinds of reasons. But do the vaccination in school, have the records, have them accessible. Yeah, schools should do it, but it has to be easy for them. I have a lot of sympathy for the schools who they just don't have the personnel to do this,
Right.
and they don't have the wherewithal to have a fight with someone who doesn't want their kid vaccinated. How are they supposed to uphold a provincial law? You're the principal of some elementary school in wherever Brampton. What are you to do, right? Somebody else should be doing this for you.
Right. Well, and it was funny. I was talking with my wife about this. We were saying, I remember I had a vaccine when I was in high school. They came in to give us vaccines. At the time, it was for hepatitis and a few other preventative diseases. And it was no big deal. They just, they call you down by alphabetically, last names A through
Yeah.
G, come down to the gym and you lay down, they give you the needle and you just sit and wait until, make sure there's no adverse side effects. Then, okay, go back to math class or wherever. My understanding is they don't do that anymore. That kind of caught me by surprise because I thought that was just a really easy way to assure a population got the necessary preventative shots. Why was it just a matter of funding? Somebody just didn't want to fund it.
Yeah,
I
it
just don't know
just
why that
became
we
a
stopped doing that.
Yeah, it's a question of bureaucracy. Well, that's the health system, therefore we don't put it in the school. But this become even more important because we live in the reality today is 20, 25% people don't have a family doctor, right? So
Right.
that's another. there's a lot of parents out there who are not anti-vaccine, but they don't have a doctor. They can't get time off work if they do have a doctor. You
Right.
have to make it easy for parents, and we don't make it easy at all. So yeah, absolutely in schools. You know, I'm of the generation where we started where vaccines were a new thing, and we did vaccine clinics at school. And it was a really exciting thing. That was big news. Kids are getting, they're not going to get measles anymore. I remember those days. We got lots of vaccines because they were all new, and it was a celebration. Now, why do people not want vaccines in school? Well, there's going to be some protester outside, and then they're going to have to hire security. And then
Right.
some kids are going to say, my parents didn't sign the form. And then what are you going to do? Do you send them home? Oh, there's nobody at home. They're working. This a lot of these complications, but we have to figure this stuff out. It's modern life. We have to adapt.
In your opinion, do we need new measures to tackle this crisis? Because this measles case, I think at one point it will burn out. It'll go away, but the problem will remain. There'll be another disease. God forbid something like polio or smallpox comes back because of a reluctance to get kids
Well,
vaccinated at the
smallpox will come back. That's eradicated, so
no.
we can cross that one off the list. That's the only one, but
I'm holding you to it because if it comes back, we're
no, it
gonna have
absolutely
worse.
won't. There's no more
Good.
smallpox on Earth since 1972, so we can be safe with that one.
No, that's good. My worries though, it's always well the other two of the measles, mumps or rubella coming back for that one. My question is, I guess I still think people take too much of their advice from Facebook. They'll see a loved one will pass along some clip or a meme that they saw on Facebook, and it's taken more as gospel than it is the word from a family physician. Do you think that we need new measures or just a new practice to combat that and to get the public back on board with, as you said, the fact that these things work, they're good. They help prolong our lives where we can live safer and more prosperous lives because of a simple needle. Do we just need to rethink this from a generation ago?
Absolutely. I think we have not adapted to the virtual world, right? Public health, one of the problems of public health is they're very old fashioned. They still operate like it's the 1950s. They're not in the digital age in any way. They don't see them posting on TikTok to counter the nonsense that's on
Mhm.
TikTok. That's what we have to do. We have to teach people, especially kids. I think this is a really key, how to spot misinformation, how to combat it. The worst people of misinformation are sort of in that 50, 40, 50, 60-year-old age group where, they didn't grow up with digital stuff and they just take stuff for granted. Kids are way more
Mhm.
smarter than us, thankfully. So I think some of this stuff will be corrected over time, but we have to give them a fighting chance. And to come back to your case of measles, I don't think it's a given it's going to burn out. I think that measles is the canary in the coal mine. That's the easy one. And I think if we start having measles being endemic again, meaning it just hangs around, which is looking like a reality, then what's going to follow is going to be mumps. It's going to be rubella. It's going to be chickenpox. These are all going to come back because it's all connected. It's really a numbers game, right? When you have a
Mhm.
certain percentage of people who aren't vaccinated, they're going to get infected. And some people who are vaccinated are going to get infected too, just by the sheer numbers. These are great tools, but they're not infallible. So I foresee this getting much worse if we don't start taking it seriously.
I don't want to leave this on a down note, but I do think that's worth jumping on. Is just what is the end game here then? I mean, I've never been in a world where measles was a really prevalent disease. So I am having a hard time wrapping my head around what that would look like because this is far more communicative than COVID was. Nobody liked that. So I don't want to be alarmist, but I can't imagine what that world looks like. Can you maybe just
Well, I'll tell you because I lived in that world. That's what I grew up
okay?
with, right? I grew up before the vaccine. What it was is everybody gets measles. Good thing is most people get better, right? But in my childhood, measles was the number one cause of blindness, number one cause of deafness, number one cause of what we used to call mental retardation, so developmental issues. Uh, The worst thing about measles is it damages your immune system, so it makes you more susceptible to every other childhood disease. And then the last thing is measles hangs around. So a small percentage of kids who get measles 5 or 10 years later are going to get gravely ill and even die because it sort of lingers in there. And there's a I won't give you the long name, but there's a symptom that can kill kids. But measles doesn't kill a lot, but it does so much damage to kids' lives, and we've forgotten that. I think the biggest problem today is that vaccines have been so successful that people have never seen these things. You've probably never seen a case of measles or the mumps. I was hospitalized with the mumps when I was a child. That was fairly common. People just don't see this. They take it for granted. And I hope we don't get to the point it's popular again because people see it. I hope it becomes popular because we see the benefits of prevention.
You are right. I have never seen measles as a public alarm case like we're seeing now. My I remember getting chicken pox when I was little, and that was that childhood illness that you get, your skin itches, and then after a week or so, after the calamine lotion and milk baths, you're over it. But it's that idea of, oh, it's just a childhood illness. You get it and you get over it. And I think you're right. We have just taken it for granted that medical science has kind of eliminated it from our lexicon in terms of our day-to-day lives. Uh, is there, I'm going to throw this question to you as somebody who covers this nationally. Is there anywhere in Canada or maybe even in the United States that you've seen report on that is doing this right? That has really, that might be a go-to example for Ontario or other provinces to look to and say that's the model we should be emulating.
Well, we've had outbreaks before, right? So I've covered these over the years. There was a big one you may remember at Disneyland in California, 2015.
Right, right,
So
right, right.
so there's a big outbreak and it spread to Canada, and it was Disney, so it got a lot of publicity. And then there was one around that time in New York State, which started in the Hasidic Jewish community, also spread to
Hmm.
Canada.
Hmm. Hmm.
What happened in both those cases is both those states, California and New York, brought in laws like we have now in Ontario. They made it mandatory. They nipped it in the bud. They did really good advertising, education campaigns. They did clinics in schools. They did outreach to the religious communities that were at the heart of the New York one. Anyhow, they got the rabbis on board to promote vaccination. Those two states did everything right. They don't have any measles now. Even with the big outbreak in the U.S., there's no cases in California. There's none in New York. There's the lesson. And the sad thing for me is they were copying Ontario, right? Look at this legislation. This is what we have to do. But they actually enforce the rules as well. That's the difference. So let's use the tools we have and use all of them. Use the law, enforce it, make it easy to get vaccinated, have a vaccine registry, do some education, make sure that the vast majority of parents vaccinate and believe in vaccination. Make sure their voice is heard. Don't cede the floor to the 1 or 2% of people who, I don't want to call them crazies, but who have extreme views and in many cases are profiting from opposing vaccines. We have to call them out. People like RFK, he's gotten very rich by being anti-vaccine. He's vaccinated himself. His kids are vaccinated, but he has this line because he gets very rich doing it. We have to call this out.
You know what? I think that's where we're going to end off this episode. That's a good note for public. If you are listening to this and you aren't vaccinated, I hope you do take the advice here and go find time. It takes 5 minutes. Go call your doctor or a community care center, Shoppers Drug Mart, even if that's what it takes. But definitely get vaccinated and help protect yourself and your family, folks. Do great for all of us. Thank you very much, Andre Picard from the Globe and Mail, for coming on today. Pleasure to speak with you and to hopefully educate some folks on what they might not know. Thank you very much.
Pleasure to chat. Thanks.